1/4 of the Pacers season is done. What has stood out about the team through 21 games plus Bucks tonight and the Fever win the WNBA Draft Lottery. It's all coming today with Pat Boylan on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, y'all, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we've got a lot to get into because 1/4 of the Pacers season is over. 21 games in, really slightly over a fourth, whatever, is done. There's a lot to talk about. They're exceeding expectations. They're beating good teams. They are 2 wins over my projection to this point. They have the 7th best net rating. How are they doing this? Is this sustainable? What is there to look forward to in the next quarter of the season? And who better to talk about that with than Pat Boylan, Pacers sports entertainment broadcaster extraordinaire on the radio, doing sideline interviews, doing play-by-play for the Fever. He knows it all, and we'll talk a little about the Fever at the end, winning the draft lottery, plus a note about tonight's Bucks game. So much to get to on today's Locked On Pacers with Pat Boylan. Let's just get right to it. The busiest man in the state is here, broadcasting for the Pacers and the Fever. Big week for both teams going on right now. It's Pat Boylan. Pat, how you doing? How are you enjoying this run of Indiana basketball success we've had for the last week?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you having me on. When you did the introduction, I was like looking over your shoulder. I thought maybe a third person was joining us, but no. Busy, but I will never, ever complain about busy, because when busy involves covering professional basketball, then you know this very well. It beats having a regular job, that's for sure. And it's one that I'm very fortunate to have. And yeah, man, it's been a thrilling week, both from what's happened with the Fever and the number one draft lottery spot. And with the Pacers, the in-season tournament run, they're on a nice uptick right now. So it's always good when, the Fever play in the summer and the Pacers play in the winter. And it's always good when you're getting both kind of making a splash during the same time, because their schedules are so different from each other.
Yeah, very rare overlapping moment, and it went great for both. For the asterisk 4-game winning streak that I'll have to put the asterisk on for all of time, overlapping with potentially one of the most significant lottery wins in the history of the W, is pretty exciting. This is a Pacers show. We will talk about the Fever at the end, though. Pat and I have done this before. Pat, 13-8. We're a quarter of the way through the season, which seems impossible, but that's where we are already. That is above where I thought they would be, admittedly, right? I had them at 11 wins so far, and their net rating is, among the best in the league. And there's many reasons for that. Despite their crummy defense, they're able to already prove to be very threatening, taking down some of the top teams. And exactly right now, their net rating is 7th and very close to 6th, right? They're better than I thought. I don't know if they're better than you thought they would be. And I'm curious, 1, big picture, what you've thought of their first quarter of the season, and 2, if they have surpassed your expectations for what they'd be to this point.
Well, I think the way at least my brain works is my expectations kind of go on a prism. Like if you would have told me they were from this point on a low end to this point on a high end, maybe a 80 to 90% confidence interval, they're definitely on the high end. I don't want to say they exceeded my expectations, mostly because the schedule up front was softer and it was very home heavy. And I thought there was the chance that this team would get out to a really good start. What's interesting is, and on another podcast that I'm a part of, Rick Carlisle actually told us, he said, we've talked to our team and the first 16 games are really important. And I thought that was fascinating, because typically you see coaches that are so micro-focused. You don't often hear them say, yeah, these first 16 games, guys, like we need to make sure we're focused in on this. But His reasoning was because 11 to 16 were at home. And I don't know 2 weeks ago or so, we're sitting at the 16-game mark and the Pacers were 9-7. And that, or they're coming off the Portland loss, and that just felt a little underwhelming, albeit 9-7, I think, is like a 46-win pace, which I would have taken, if they get there, I'll take it now. But it just felt a little underwhelming with the level of competition and with all the home games, but I think they've more than made up for that. These last 5 games, you've had 4 on the road. This is not including the championship game, the asterisk throwing in there, but the other 5, you've had 4 on the road against all good teams but one, and you've gone 4-1 in there. And I think that has probably more than made up for where you felt like you were at 9-7. I maybe would have had this team at 12. You'd like to be at 13 if you can get there, and that's where they are. So yeah, I think they're in a good spot, and they're on the more optimistic end of what my preseason projection would have been.
I had them at 11-10 to this point, and it's funny because that is baked in a win against Portland and a win against Charlotte, right? So that's what's been really interesting is they're not only have they exceeded win expectations, is they've beaten like literally every good team that they've played, sans the Lakers, at some point, right? And that has been most shocking to me is their peak is just like, we can beat anybody. As a consequence of their crummy defense, they can also lose to anybody, as we've seen already 4 or 5 times, but they've recovered well. And right, they're finally having this week, right? They won without Halliburton. They played for stretches, good defense against the Bucks and Celtics, like rounding into form a bit and sitting at 13-8. So to be above expectation to me, I kind of thought they would be a good offensive team and a bad defensive team. In fact, I think the Pacers thought that's kind of what they would be this season. The reason I think they've exceeded expectations a little bit, at least to me, is their offense isn't good. It's unbelievable. It's the best ever. And that just makes it possible for them to be so much more than just like a 45-win team. It's like, like every game you play, your opponent's like, crap, we're playing the Pacers. Like, this is hard. This is tough. They're really hard to stop, and it changes the dynamics of every game. And they can, if their offense falls apart, have off nights against crummy teams, as we've seen, but they also can beat anybody. They've beaten the team with the best net rating in the league, the second best net rating in the league. Like, they've been toppling some of these best teams. And I think the reason to me is their offense is just way, way better. Like 123.5 offensive rating looks fake to see on paper. It's just way better than I thought. And it's been so significant for their season.
Yeah, I think right now the offense is pulling them up more than the defense is pulling them down. But they're a fascinating team because if I would have sat here at the beginning of the season and told you I'm clairvoyant and can see into the future, and here's a little tidbit for you, they're going to have beaten the Celtics once, the Bucks twice, the 76ers once, the Cavs twice. Am I missing anybody in there? I mean, the Heat, thank you. You'd go, oh my gosh, this team might have 16 wins at this point. On the flip side, if I did the same exercise and said to you, listen, they're going to lose to Toronto, Chicago, Charlotte, Washington, and Portland, you'd have gone, oh my gosh, has this thing gone off the rails? And the answer is, of course, somewhere in the middle, but probably closer to the positive end than the negative end. Going into the year, I thought, if this can be somewhere between like the 6th to 8th best offensive team in the league, and you can get your defense from late 20s to maybe around 20, that you'd like where you're finishing. And obviously the offense has been much better than that. The defense has been worse. But on balance, I think it might even be a touch better than that prediction, just because you can't just look at the rating specifically for the Pacers in this instance, because they're not just number one, but like they're number one with such an absurd number one that one is much better than the 28 is bad. And that's what's interesting right now. And then so you try to project and you say, well, can they keep up these ridiculous numbers offensively? That's going to be a tough thing to keep up. But at the same time, to me, there's no reason a team that finished, I think, 27th defensively last year can't be at least a little better than that with guys like Bruce Brown coming over. So it makes projecting from this group, I think, really challenging.
The slow climb up to 28th in defense has been fun the last couple of weeks. I agree with you. Also, to go back to something you said earlier, you are allowed to say the Sideline Guys podcast with Pat Boylan and Jeremiah Johnson on the show. You don't have to call it.
That's fair. I just didn't want to be rude.
Another podcast
this isn't my time. We've had you on our show. I've been on yours. I think now this is the second time. I think some cross promoting is more than fair. But I didn't want to come in here and in the first 2 minutes start talking about my show, Tony.
Your show with Rick Carlisle. Yes, it is definitely worth listening to for anyone who's listening to this. Yeah, they're 4.5 points better than the third rated offense, which is just like bananas. Like the Bucks are third. They are 4.5 points better than the 14th offense, right? Like that gap is so significant. And defensively, yes, they're awful, but like the gap between them and the team ahead of them, or two teams ahead of them, is the gap between that team and like 24, right? So like the differences, like you just said, is why their net rating is so significant. And so I am inclined to say, big picture, like in theory, this isn't how it works, but they are one of the 4 best net ratings in the East, right? So, like in theory, that's a team that can win around in the postseason. I don't know if I'm there yet. We'll see. The season will progress. Teams will adjust. We've already seen teams start to double Tyrese Halliburton a little bit more and disrupt what he's doing. We really saw that in Detroit and the Lakers game. Like now I think there's enough sample for teams to have different scouting reports, right? How do the Pacers respond to that? But currently as it stands, like being a top 7 team, maybe that falls to 12, 13, like you said. They have a heavy home schedule. They've played some easier opponents, but even if they're in the top half, they are better than I thought by default. I predicted they would win 40 games. So it's been really impressive. And I think the first quarter takeaway is their offense is that good that they can be better than everybody thought already, despite having over half their rotation on their rookie scale deals. Hey, everybody, have to take a short little moment to talk to you about the lovely people and our partners at eBay Motors, who have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're preparing for a daily draft or scouring the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players who are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Players of the Week. One of them, a guy who just had a nice game against the Pacers, Ausar Thompson. He's playing a lot. He's playing at the 4 now. If Thompson was dropped in your fantasy league, go grab him because he's back starting, and Monty Williams has hopefully realized his error. He could be a guy in for some big minutes and some big opportunities, and he fills up the stat sheets. My goodness, he can do a little bit of everything. Other names from Josh: Jonathan Kuminga, who's been playing a little better for the Warriors; Keontae George, who's starting at point guard for the Jazz; Dante Exum, who's now starting for the Mavs, who are a little injured; and Isaiah Hartenstein, who's now going to be starting for the Knicks for a while with Mitchell Robinson injured for New York. Josh Lloyd on Locked On Fantasy Basketball can help you win your fantasy championship, while eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit, and that's the same with your vehicle. Do you have a favorite memory of a car you love? I'll never forget my Sebring that I started my driving life with. I love that thing. I also had to get a new rear trunk for it at one point. I had to go to the scrapyard and figure it out. It took forever to make sure it fit right. I should have just used eBay Motors, because with over 122 million parts for your ride or die, you can make sure it stays running smoothly. They got brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs. eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it is guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or you'll just get your money back. And at those prices, you are burning rubber, not cash. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay's Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply.
Yeah, I think their offense puts them in a position where they're in almost every game. Their defense puts them in a position where the opponent has been in most of these games too. But I think one thing that's noteworthy also, as long as he stays relatively healthy, the Pacers have been in just about every game they've played in. And I think over the course of time, you look at that clutch rating and games that are close and all that, there's a million ways to look at it. But over time, if you're constantly giving yourself a chance to win, I think you're going to like where you are at the end of the season. And this team was doing that at this point last year too. And so, important to note, there's some uncontrollables that could come into play. You hope they don't. The Halliburton injury kind of derailed last season. You could maybe make a case for the better. We'll have to see how the draft picks turn out. But at this point, I probably was at 42 wins maybe to start the year. And if you would have had me lock into a seed, I might have said 7. And my 90% confidence interval was somewhere between 5. And if everything went wrong, save just catastrophic injuries, maybe 11. Right now, I think I'm probably moving that up a notch. I think maybe my middle ground is 6 or 7. With I do think home court in the first round is a possibility. I also think you look at the standings.
Nice.
You look at the standings, and they're only I think a game or a half game ahead of some of those teams in the play-in tournament, and really through 9 is like Brooklyn's not far from 9 either. So it's
right.
it's something, it's so easy, I think, to look up and say, wow, you're not far from this team. Wow, you're not far from this team. Look where you are. But like, there's a lot of pretty good teams that are near you too. But I do think they've done a nice job of setting the foundation here where they hopefully don't have to play catch up by the end of the year.
They are equally close to 4-9. Love the Eastern Conference. This
there you go. Right. And that pretty much describes where I think I am with this team. Like, where's middle ground for me? Probably 6 or 7. Could get up to 4, could fall back to 9. But you do have a little bit of nice cushion already over Atlanta and 10, which is good.
Yep. Yeah, Atlanta dropping right now, and Toronto is significant for at least their play-in chances, depending on how things break. And look, if Tyrese Haliburton plays, you just said it, like, they're gonna have a chance. One game he's played where they had no chance? That was Orlando, right? Like every other game, they've been in it at least, even though they have lost some of them that they would like to have back. So big picture, it's really hard to not be encouraged by their start. They have been healthy. They are currently down 2 rotation players, but they haven't lost a starter for any significant stretch at all. Of course, that matters, but taking advantage while healthy still matters for an ascending team. So I think that's been good. And I think that as they pivot to the second quarter of the season, I sound like Jim Irsay with some of these fake times of seasons, but in the next 20, 21 games, whatever, until they hit the halfway point, I'll be interested if they can, as we saw against Boston, like their effort was there. They were defending a little better. Yeah, the Celtics missed some shots, but like holding them to 112 is impressive. They defended well enough against Milwaukee for stretches. They did not defend well against the Pistons, but that game was like the hardest mental strain game ever. Can they get their defense? This is going to sound like a low bar, but I mean this as like an actual attainable goal for them. Can they get their defense to like 24th or 23rd, right?
Yeah.
The Bucks are 23rd right now, and the Bucks have an awesome offense as well. Can they pass the Hawks, Jazz, Spurs, and Pistons defensively? That sounds sad to say, but if they can do that and not sacrifice a lot on offense, then I'll really believe like, okay, this team can be a playoff certainty basically and has a chance to be really serious there because we know they can score. And like I just said, if Haliburton plays, they can be any game. So the next attainable goal, something they've been working on despite some unsuccessful efforts so far to their detriment. This is a criticism. They haven't defended well, but if they can get it up even just 3-4 spots, it would go such a long way for them.
It absolutely would. And I think if you look at realistic, attainable goals, like that is probably the best case scenario for what this team could accomplish. I think it's realistic to expect them to continue to improve defensively. You've got a new defensive system. I know we're a quarter of the way into the year now, but a new-ish defensive system that's come in. And you're right, like it's been slow creeping progress, but there has been just a little bit of progress defensively. I think you would say on balance, you've defended better the last 2 weeks than you did maybe the previous 2 weeks. They're going to need to see more of it. As good as their offense has been, and as much as their offense is pulling them up more than down, in the playoffs, if they're a team that's hitting the playoffs, and they absolutely can get there, ranked 28th defensively, but can they win a playoff series 28th defensively? That's probably where I draw the line. But I do think you're right. Like if you're going to play offense this well, it's not going to take the Pacers becoming 10th defensively, which, by the way, not to get down a big rabbit hole here, but I find the whole conversation fascinating because for any Pacers fan growing up or anybody that's covered the Pacers for a long time, like the conversation was always opposite with the good Pacers teams, right? Like remember the 2012, 2013 team was like historic defensively. And it was like, if they can just muster enough offense, and now we're having the complete polar opposite conversation. But I definitely think it's true. I was asked, I think, kind of an intriguing question by one of the hosts of one of our radio affiliates, which was, we were talking about the offense and how it's so good. And I said, I think part of it is just because you've got Haliburton, who's playing like a top 5 offensive player right now. And then when healthy, you've got 8 or 9 other guys. And really every night you only need 3 or 4 of those 8 to step up. And they're all capable of doing so. So you're not yet reliant on any specific player. You've seen all of these guys step up in a big moment, and he asked, is that sustainable? Is that something that the Pacers could have bigger success with? And I think it's all dependent on how you're viewing it. Like in the prism of this season, can that work? Absolutely, it is working. And I'm not saying that in the future, as they bring over other players, like they number one offense isn't good enough. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is like for this year and what they're doing and the step forward they're trying to take, it absolutely is good enough. I think if you look at the front office and Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan, they say, well, to get that's good enough for this year, and that can take you a nice step forward and can probably win a playoff series. And look, with Halliburton, I'm not throwing anything, as an impossibility, but as the franchise hopes to grow in the way that they do, I do think you're going to need to have a tertiary player that steps up, whether it's somebody on the roster, whether it's somebody that they bring in.
Okay, I have two responses to everything you just said, which means you just said a lot of interesting things. One, do you know how many teams with a below average defense won a playoff round last season?
I don't.
The answer is one. That one team was the New York Knicks, who defended like crazy in their first round series, but were 19th in regular season defense. The other 7 teams that won their first round series were all 15th or better in defensive rating. So that is already like, if you're the Pacers, you got to get it up, right? And you just said it. You know the playoffs are going to be a different beast there. 2, I've kind of had that as this is a working thesis all season. They need Halliburton's good almost every game. Like one of every 10, maybe. He has like a down, air quotes, game. They just need one other guy to really step up and be good to win. I wrote this after, I forget which game they lost. It might have been Charlotte. And last night it was Mathurin, and it's been Turner a lot, and it's been Nesmith sometimes, and it's been Bruce Brown sometimes. So I think you nailed it. Can that be, and I think with Halliburton's passing, the answer is maybe, but can that be a consistent strategy, or it's just wherever the hole is in the defense, someone has to attack that matchup and succeed offensively for you to win? And sometimes that doesn't happen, and they lose games they should win. Or do you really need someone that you can count on in that role? I think if they want to win playoff series, that's bad podcasting, whatever. The answer is, yeah, you need somebody more consistent. But right now, in their state of info gathering, growth, development, it's fine what they're doing because they're giving guys chances to be that guy, to develop, to grow. And it's been working. They very rarely had games where like Halliburton's unbelievable and everybody else stinks and they lose. That has happened. Charlotte was one of those games, but that has been an infrequent formula for loss for them. So I think the 2 things to see in the next stage is, does someone make that a consistent thing on the team? Like Mathurin's game last night, I bet they're like, whew, that's, if they're going to double Halliburton and Turner's going to get that attention in the lane on rolls, that's going to be huge. Or can they get to 24th, 23rd defensively? The Knicks were 19th last year. Like I said, one of the worst team to win around on that end. So those are the 2 things I think in the rest of the season, really, but really in the next half, especially pre-trade deadline, that I think they would like to see. One more break here, guys. I got to talk to you about the lovely people over at Gametime, the absolute best way to buy tickets to the next big event, whatever it is. If it's sports, if it's comedy, if it's theater, if it's music, Gametime is the way to go. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, their best price guarantee, no more guesswork when you're buying your tickets. I should know because I used it in New York. I've explained this many times when talking about them, but I wanted to see the Liberty play in person this summer when I was in New York. Hopped on Gametime the day before the game. I could see the views from the seat I wanted, so I could kind of scour the lower bowl, figure out what I wanted. I knew it was going to be the best value because of their low price guarantee. And I knew the price I was getting, so there was no secret little fees in there. It is the best. Their Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime's going to credit you 110% of the difference. How about that for a way of knowing what you're getting? Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. How about that? Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off at Gametime. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about that. And you touched on a point that I actually made during one of my air quote sideline hits that I do on the road, because there's sideline hits from a studio across the country, but which is, look, Halliburton has had some just stunningly good games this year, but I think just like the Pacers, they have maybe one real stinker, at least in games that he's played in. The Boston game he didn't play in, obviously also qualifies, but Halliburton, not that he had many bad games last year, but the guy, like, if you look at the Orlando game, he didn't play well. And any of the others, like, I challenge you to say for him, below standard, he's had them. But like, even for, if you just say average NBA starting point guard, I think you can make a case that even all of his other poor games are better than average. And because of that, he's been there every single night. You've had that as a constant. And last year, if you look, he didn't have a ton of bad games, but he did have more than this. And I know the exciting angle of Tyrese Halliburton is like he's doing these, incredible things in the 30 and 15 games and all of that. And as it should be, by the way, I'm not criticizing that, but I think also like a less sexy headline is that like the guy has just brought it every single night. Even when he hasn't had it, he's figured out a way to bring it. And, you started the show talking about expectations and all of that. And with him specifically, I'm wondering like where you had him, if you're going to use my 80% confidence interval prism type method, how high is he on what he's doing right now versus what your expectations were? Because I think anybody that watches the Pacers or watches this guy regularly thought pretty highly of him.
Yep.
But the stuff he's doing right now, I mean, he's in pretty crazy rarefied air, especially for his age.
Yeah, I want to tweet this stat at some point, but I'll let listeners get it first. He has more games shooting over 60% from the field than under 40, right? Like
that's nuts.
What?
Yeah.
And so to your point about bad games, which is like a comedy way of describing them, 5 times he's been under 42% from the field. In 4 of those, they won his minutes. and in 4 of them, 16, 10, 13, 13 assists, right? The Orlando game was completely miserable, but the other 4, it's like, this is a bad game for him. Like, it's insane. And yeah, I think if you made me choose your percentiles range on it, this is probably pretty close to the top end, like 85, 90, just because of the scoring, right? I said this in a show before the summer of like, to me, a big thing about him taking the next leap is that he did not need someone to set him up to be efficient last year, right? Such a small percentage of his shots were assisted, 43% of his threes, 24% of his twos last year. And he still had a true shooting percentage of whatever it was, 62.4. This year, 35% of his threes are assisted, even fewer. 23% of his twos are assisted, even fewer. And his true shooting percentage is 67. So the fact that he's just a walking solo offensive show is why he's averaging 27 points per game. And that is like, I thought he would do a little more of that because it's kind of like not his natural way of playing, as he said himself. Like he wants to pass and set guys up, and that's awesome. He leads the league in assists. But a lot of times the best offense for the Pacers is like, dude, Tyrese Halliburton shoot, and he figures it out in the second half sometimes, and then they win. And so him doing that all the time it was not something I necessarily expected, but he's done it, and it's been massive. And that's why he's been one of the best pick your number 5, 8, 10 players in the NBA.
Yeah, going into last season, I remember getting this question, like for Halliburton to, jolt into stardom, what's going to need to happen? And I remember, my answer kind of being, can he average 3-4 more points per game while keeping the assists up?
Yes.
And the biggest key is keeping the efficiency up, because going into a couple of years ago, the guy was crazy efficient, but not on a crazy volume, right? So like there's a chicken and an egg question there. Is he really efficient because of he's taking only the very best looks, which would be impressive anyway, by the way, or can he keep this up? And what he did last year was exactly what I thought he needed to do, which makes this year, I don't want to say stunning, because I did think he'd take another step forward, but like I didn't see this offensive explosion from his own scoring perspective with the shooting percentages staying where they are.
Getting better.
Yeah, the assist numbers are bonkers, but Tony, I think you can make a case that his scoring numbers are even more even though this guy, his best talent is his passing. It's him or Jokic, probably the best passer in the game right now, and from a guard perspective, it's probably him. But like in a weird way, his efficiency with how many more shots he's taking and how much more spotlight he's getting, to me, that's more shocking and impressive than even his assists, which almost feels silly to say.
Yeah, I like you looked at stars last year, and so he was like one of the of the all-stars. I want to say his 15 shot attempts per game was like among the fewest, maybe the fewest. And so I argued like get it to 16 or 17, that's a big deal. So he did, and his 2-point percentage is a career high. His 3-point percentage is a career high. Oh, and his assists per game is a career high. Like it's just comical what his numbers are. And so we can, dibble dabble and all these things are like, oh, they need to be better at this and this, and it's like, oh well, they have this guy in their team, and none of that matters. They'll be fine.
And in a very simplistic way, and this does not mean to this is not intended to demean any other player on that roster. Why have the Pacers taken maybe a bigger than expected step forward this year? It's because Tyrese Halliburton has taken a bigger step forward than expected this year. I think even among a lot of optimists, and there's been a lot of really good stuff around him. But the other thing is, unlike maybe a player who's a big time scorer, when Halliburton is taking his step to a higher than maybe even expected range, it's also making everybody else better. And so that I think, if you needed to summarize the Pacers the Pacers season in a couple of sentences, that's probably it.
Speaking of a couple sentences, I do want to touch on their game tonight against the Bucks, just because, Pat, I think there's going to be at some point the emotional letdown game after the in-season tournament. And the Bucks typically have been a challenge for the Pacers, although not this season. And Damian Lillard's going to have just a hint of personal touch to this game. Just get the emotional game out of the way. I have a feeling the Bucks might kick their butt tonight, and I just wanted to say that because I hate doing a whole show and not talking about the game that's happening in 12 hours or whenever people are listening to this. But I think this could be the one, and you recover and bounce back against the Wizards if you're the Pacers, because it's got to happen, right? Like it just does. It's just how humans work, and the Bucks are gonna, especially after getting their butt kicked in the tournament last year, it's going to mean a lot to them. So I do not expect the Pacers to win tonight, and then we can move on to the Fever.
Yeah, it's why I thought the Detroit game was so important, because
Agreed.
If you win it, then I think you've given yourself an ability for that game to potentially be what you say. And look, in the years that the Pacers have been good and challenging for playoff positioning and all of that, I don't know that there's any game I ever went into thinking that the Pacers don't have a chance. And I don't think that here. But like, if you look at the extenuating circumstances, you're on the road against what will probably be a top 2 team in the East that you've already beaten twice, that you just, I don't want to say embarrassed, but you beat them on national TV in a game that everybody thought they were going to win. Yeah, this is going to be a tough one. I think that's fair to say. And you know what? Because they beat Detroit, because they've taken care of business lately, if it is a tough one, I think it's allowed to be a tough one.
If the Bucks win, I'm not allowed to be lazy anymore and just say, well, they'll never beat Giannis, because they'll beat him 3 times in a row. So they will be ruining my lazy things. All right. Pat is the man on the broadcasts for the Fever. And the Fever just had a very significant day on Sunday. They win the 2nd draft lottery in a row. That has happened 3 times in the W before. Every team that has won one consecutive draft lotteries has won a championship within 4 seasons. Pat, what does this just mean for the Fever?
That stat's amazing. I'm like sitting here, you saying it. I've seen it on Twitter, so I knew where you were going with it. But like, it's still amazing. Look, I think back to the Fever had this obviously incredible run with Tamika Catchings, where every year they were a title contender. They won 1. They went to 3 finals. They were in the playoffs every single year for more than a decade. She left in the bottom, fell out. And I just think of so many years where the Fever had the number 1 lottery odds, and then they got the 3rd pick. And then they had the number 2 lottery odds, and they got the 3rd pick. And there were times where they didn't have bad luck, like they had the number 2 lottery odds and got the 2nd pick. But they couldn't find good luck in this thing to save their absolute lives. I mean, even the Nalissa Smith draft, there was a hope, a realistic hope that you'd be number 1 in that one. But it's all come full circle now to get it here back-to-back years. And there's a conversation, and some of it, to be frank with you, I cannot have in the detail that we would probably like due to my affiliation with Pacer Sports Entertainment and the Fever. There's only so much that we can talk about players that have not declared for the draft, just to be clear. But Aaliyah Boston was obviously a franchise-changing player last year, and this draft certainly has the potential to have maybe even more than one of those types of players. And it's just amazing how for years it felt like nothing on draft lottery night could go right or would go right. And now it feels like they can do no wrong. And it's stunning how quickly, I mean, you think of just a few years ago, this Fever team kind of felt rudderless. And now you're looking at them and you go, if the right player or maybe a couple players comes out, like they could be set to be terrific for a long, long time. And it's just stunning how quickly that 180 has happened.
100%. And, it was fascinating always looking back. Like, they get the second pick in 2018, and they're thrilled to get Kelsey Mitchell, an all-star player, but like Asia Wilson was the number one pick, right?
Yeah.
They get T in 2019, a great player, but Jackie Young was the number one pick. Like, the years they didn't win it, the number 3 in 2020, and Escu goes number one. Like if you would have won it, there was a significant talent there. So to win it last year, when Aaliyah Boston declared, obviously massive, all-star starter already. To win it this year, when I won't do it either for you now, there could be a very significant.
You're allowed to say whatever you want. I can't confirm, deny, or discuss
Sure.
at length.
Yeah, Kayla
the
Clark.
player you're referencing is allowed to be said. Her name is allowed to be said. I just can connect no dots.
She might play for the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Theoretical.
She might have beaten Aaliyah Boston in the NCAA tournament last time around. Just like a phenomenal partnership if it happens, and just how it's gone in the W, right? Lauren Jackson and Sue Bird within 4 years, with now Fever GM Lynn Dunn as the GM back then, the championship in the 2000s, the Storm again with Joelle Lloyd and Brianna Stewart, the Aces with their 3 in a row with Plum, Asia, and Jackie. Like, it's just how it's gone in this league, and the Fever already have another all-star in Kelsey Mitchell and some other nice ascending young pieces. It's a fun time for the Indiana pro sports teams, and it was a great night for the Fever a couple nights ago. It was very fun to see the reactions to them winning that lottery again, because I have seen too many of them getting pulled earlier than they thought and not having to have those reactions.
I think the key maybe just is we need to have a public party, because every time there's been a public party, they've gotten the number one pick. When there were private parties or everyone was just kind of watching on their own, that's when things went south. So maybe that's the recipe in the future. Hopefully there's no draft lottery for the Fever for a very long time. This could be the type of draft lottery to end all draft lotteries for the Fever, at least for the near future. But no, I've had this conversation with you. We probably had it on some airways, whether it was this or the Pacers podcast or somewhere else. I think there have just been so many parallels between where the Pacers are and where the Fever are, and Aaliyah Boston and Tyrese Halliburton and these young 22, 23-year-old players that have the potential to be transcendent talents, the potential to be, dangerous words here with Tamika Catchings and Reggie Miller, but to be up in that conversation with the best players of all time in NBA and WNBA franchise history, still very early. And with the Fever getting the number one pick and the potential, to draft, there's numerous really exciting players out there. But, the idea of Tyrese Halliburton and, potentially Benedict Mathurin, and on the Fever side, Aaliyah Boston, this number one pick, and who they have, and the potential to have that for 10 to 15 years. The Fever have had some great runs. The Pacers have had some great runs. And for some of that, there was overlap, like Tamika's era. There definitely was overlap with some of those really good Pacers teams. But I mean, man, the future is just really, really exciting. And it's kind of crazy how quickly it's all happened, because 2.5 years ago, before the Halliburton trade, both teams felt just pretty rudderless. And 10 out of 10, at least so far, in terms of where you are now compared to then.
I think in 2022, I saw combined like 14 wins by the teams combined. That's not right. Obviously, that's way too low, but it was not a good year for the franchises. And now, boy, are they trending in the right direction. You can check out Locked On Women's Basketball for more on the lottery, and I wrote about it for the next. And I have another thing coming about the Fever pretty soon. Pat, this was fantastic. I always love being able to talk about both teams, and in general, this fun fourth of the season we've had for the Pacers so far. Where can people find you, what you do with the Pacers and the Fever, and all that yada yada?
Well, once you are done listening to this podcast, and once you listen to Tony's, the nice thing about podcasts is we're not competing for airtime, right? Like, we're not ABC and CBS airing something at the exact same hour. You can listen to both. It is legal. Sideline Guys, powered by Gainbridge, is the podcast that Jeremiah and I do. It goes through the Pacers channels. Pacers Sound is the umbrella that kind of houses it. So that's what you'd follow for that. And, I get the great opportunity to work with Mark Boyle on the radio broadcast. I jump over onto the TV side post-game to work with Jeremiah Johnson. And then I get to do the play-by-play for the Fever. So it's 3 very different roles on different mediums. But we appreciate the fans here listening that we have, that listen on radio, that watch on TV, that watch the Fever. And if you're a Pacers fan, I've been saying this for the last year plus. I think it's becoming even more accurate now. if you're a Pacers fan who has really enjoyed, I think, this last year and a half of building and kind of getting into the ground level of something exciting, so many parallels to what the Fever are doing right now and where they are. And so we would love to have you on board on the Fever side as well, if you already haven't come on over to the Fever side.
Agreed. The Fever community clearly expanding, which has been very fun to see these last couple of years. And Pat didn't even mention the thing I get to text him about all the time, which is he is the best stat researcher in Indiana, the only person who can find information faster than me, which is both impressive and infuriating for me personally. So
that is not true. You are definitely better at it than I am, but it is something, not to get on a tangent here because we're wrapping up, but it is something that I think it's a balance for a broadcaster, because you can't just sit there and spew out stats and stats and stats and stats, but the ones that really make an impact. Tyrese Halliburton is shooting more and he's shooting at a better rate. You had one that's escaping me right now that when I heard it, my jaw almost hit the floor. I mean, those are the moments that I love, when you can use stats to tell a story and to explain something that can't otherwise be put into place except with that power. But I appreciate you, especially on the W beat where there's a few less people out there than in a Pacers season, because oftentimes I'll be bouncing things off of you. And that makes our broadcast better, and hopefully vice versa.
Pat is on Twitter at Pat Boylan Pacers. You can find me there at Tony R. East. If we said something dumb, please direct all your comments to Pat. And this show is at Locked On Pacers. Back tomorrow talking about whatever happens in the Bucks game. We'll see if they can avoid the letdown that I have now predicted. And I have famously been wrong about this team many a time this season. Thank y'all for listening. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you soon.